I think that probably the most important thing is systems. And the reason I think systems are so important, that first of all, they're helping me scale. But I also think they're incredibly important because you cannot just rely on people. If you just rely on people and your property manager leaves, then you're in terrible shape, right? They've taken all that information with them.
I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. Today, I have with me Michael Borba. Now, I know Michael through some other channels. We actually share some acquaintances. I would share their names, but I'm not sure that I have their permission. They might have to hunt me down. Okay, no, I'm joking, obviously. But I do know Michael through some other channels, through some other Phoebe chapter leaders, and I'm super excited to have him here on my show because honestly, Michael and I haven't had a chance to talk very much. So you're going to get a chance to see us talk about the real estate field and what it means to us. So hold on a second. Let me share here my screen so that you guys can see his bio. All right, this is Michael Borba. He is the CEO and board president of a 2-generation-old property management company called Borba Property Management Group, Borba Property Group. Here's a picture of his team, as you can see. Michael has been working with the family business since graduating with his bachelor's in finance from his father's alma mater, California State University, Fullerton. More recently, Michael graduated with his MBA from USC. I'm also a USC grad. Michael is also a licensed real estate broker and a certified property manager candidate. He is a golf enthusiast, avid cyclist, and proud husband and father of 2 sons. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Christina. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our discussion this morning.
Yes, it's I mean, Borba Property Group, like I said, has been, shown to me, or I've come across it a couple of times. I think you guys might even have managed a client of mine's properties. And I also, like I said, I know you through, another Phoebe chapter leader as well. And so I'm excited to finally get to talk with you. So Michael, give me an idea of where you started in real estate.
It's funny when people ask me that question. I tell them I don't ever remember not having been involved in real estate. So, we're a real estate family. My parents started this company in the 80s. It started as a brokerage and morphed into a management company. And I'd say that my earliest memory of real estate is being a 4 or 5-year-old stuck in an open house. It wasn't a lot of fun when I was a kid,
Right.
but of course, there's a lot of family stories and a lot of investment stories, and of course, some trouble along the way that has shaped me and my personal investments. But I've always been involved in real estate, and my folks are investors as well, and I didn't think there was any other way but to invest. And that's a positive thing, and it's also a negative because I haven't been as excited or involved in educating myself in terms of real estate. And so in the last few years, I really have tried to learn a lot more rather than just relying on my upbringing and what was natural because I was involved in real estate. But either way, moved on to when I was in college, I was the president of the Real Estate Association, so I've always had some extra interest. And then I started working with a company, family company, and at some point, I sort of thought, this little company, Dad, I'm not interested. It's too small for me. And my dad always says, hire a teenager while they know everything, right? And so he gave me some incentives to continue in the business, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm glad that he had that foresight because it's really neat to be able to come up in a family business and then take that and run with it and grow.
So tell us a little bit. So Borba has a particular focus in property management. You guys, you have a very specific market and you have a sense for what it is that you guys do well.
So when I started working with the company, we managed about 450 units, and that was in the early 2000s. Currently, we manage over 3,000 units, and the focus has been on helping local startup investors in adding value to their properties. That's changed a little bit now with AB 1492. It's a little bit harder to add value, and I think people have changed their focus a little bit. However, that is still where I think our greatest strength lies, and that is in taking a building that needs to be stabilized, making some important improvements, both to the exterior and interior, and to the level of residents in the building, and turning it around and making it a positive investment for our clients, something that they can refinance, pull more money out of, and go buy their next piece of real estate. We do that all within probably about 20 miles of our corporate office. I think location is really, really important to property management. If your manager is too far away from your building, they don't have and they don't have other properties nearby, they don't visit it as much. So anywhere from South Bay, San Pedro, Manhattan Beach down to Santa Ana, that's our main focus for that style of building.
And I believe you've also gotten into maybe some larger buildings recently having to do with helping. I mean, if your focus is primarily working with investors, people like me, people who own multi-units, use them for a form of either growing appreciation or cash flow, right? And therefore you're holding that focus. I believe you're also saying that you're starting to work with some larger buildings.
So now we have probably about 10 buildings in San Diego County that are much larger, and we have I think about 800 units there now. And we were introduced to a client who's been really great in helping us grow up in the business. It's very different to manage 15 units compared with managing 150 units.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're learning that the client loves that we're 100% focused on his buildings in that market. And he's helping us grow, and like I said, we thought we would achieve our economies of managing 2,000 units in these bigger buildings, but it's a new business, and it's really neat to learn, and certainly it's going to help our growth in the future into that style of building. And we will go a little bit farther for that style of building too, because you're able to maintain a larger on-site staff, and proximity is not quite as critical.
Yeah, because you already have somebody who's literally, you have somebody physically there. So you're having
Yep.
conversations with them. You have eyes on the ground. You're not having to drive by the building very
Sure, and
often to check.
FaceTiming, and we can they can show us stuff around the building, and now we've got really incredible software too, where pretty much everything includes a photo, an upload of a photo, and we know what's going on.
Okay, that goes right into a huge question that is one of my favorites, which is, why is property management important? Whether it's you or somebody else, let's just talk to me about why hire a good property manager.
Well, I obviously I'm a manager, so I think it's probably the most critical thing. But I've experienced it myself, and I've invested in other markets where I didn't have a great property manager, and they were mostly with partners in partnerships, of course, and it was tough to find a good manager. Unfortunately, our industry we've been likened to used car salesmen before, because it's tough to find a good manager. A lot of people are undercutting managers like us, and in management, it certainly is a situation where you get what you pay for. So having a really great management partner who's going to operate your buildings for you is, I think, your key to success in property management. And I have a lot of people who have come to me because they've tried to do it on their own and realized that I'm gonna focus on what I do best. I'm gonna go work in my industry and make money so that I can continue to invest and leave management to the professionals. And I think it's important to make sure that you hire a good manager. There are lots of different websites where you can find questions to ask managers. But asking those questions, there isn't a right answer. I believe that you're going to tell by asking those questions whether this is the right person, whether you have a good feeling about them, and you think they could be a good partner moving forward. But I suggest when you hire a manager, whether it's me or somebody else in the future, you've got to keep your finger on the pulse, but you've also got to let them do their job, because they are the professionals. As long as you continue to have a level of comfort and look over your reports and go over reports with your manager, find a good one. They're going to be the key to success, I think, in real estate investing.
I want to stay with this topic for a little bit because, like I said, it's one of my favorites, having owned single families, fourplexes, and multi-units in state and out of state. I discovered early as an investor, I had a condo in Brea and I had a townhome in Fairfax, Virginia, and I visited them both the same. And given that I only live 60 miles from Brea, and I obviously live thousands of miles from Fairfax, Virginia, I really started to understand where my propensity lies as an owner. And so I became very reliant on property managers being the ones making my properties perform, because I was not going to do the drive-bys. I had to, be honest with myself I'm not a hands-on manager. I'm a manager of managers. I do really well with other people. I have a master's in psychology, so there you go. But I do have a bachelor's in business as well. And so really that was my strength. But I did discover, again, having owned long distances, that the management company defined the success of my property. I could buy an awesome property, a very nice B grade, C grade property, fully occupied with stable rents and stable tenants. And I could put a property manager in place and it would go down. I call it the lowest common denominator, right? If you do not have a property management company that's paying attention to your building or doesn't have a high level of understanding of the professionalism, what property management is, which is, I think, honestly, relatively complex. And we'll get into maybe some of those complexities in a minute. Your property manager defines the success of your building, or it can simply be lowered to the lowest common denominator. So you end up with a C building in a B neighborhood or a D building in a C neighborhood, and they're really not focused on it. I've worked with people who are a little like, yeah, no, my house has been empty for 6 months. I'm like, 6 months? What's going on with your property manager? I don't know. And I'm like, well, we need to talk about this, because that kind of vacancy of 6 months is not usually planned in people's numbers on having a successful property. So there's certain questions I ask, like you said, there's not right and wrong answers. The answers align either with your values as an investor and the building that you have, right? Because A buildings can be managed differently than C buildings. So for me, one of my primary questions is, what software do you use? Are you willing to take pictures, right? And review of management statements. So why don't you dig into some of the things that truly makes for a superior property management company?
I think that probably the most important thing is systems. And the reason I think systems are so important, that first of all, they're helping me scale. But I also think they're incredibly important because you cannot just rely on people. If you just rely on people and your property manager leaves, then you're in terrible shape, right? They've taken all that information with them. So I think one of the most important questions I would ask is, what sort of systems do you have to ensure that my property continues to be managed well, as long as you manage it? How do I know you're going to be doing rent increases every year, or coming to me and asking me to do rent increases every year, or making recommendations? How do I know all those things are going to happen? And I think those are the most critical questions, because smaller management companies, which may be great, you're really just relying on a couple people who have a ton of knowledge, who if they leave, or heaven forbid get sick or something like that, it impacts the management of your building. So I think systems are critical. And I just wanted to get back to another thing you said earlier, which was, having a property management, I think a property manager also is critical, because you need sort of a buffer between all those issues that your tenants have with your manager. I mean, if you're always dealing with the issues, if you're a self-manager and you're dealing with the floods and sometimes the fires and the no pays and the evictions, I think it turns you off to real estate investing. And it's important to have a barrier between you and that chaos. Property ownership and property management is a very chaotic business, and so I think what a good manager does is systematizes all those issues, makes sure that the most important things are happening really well. And of course, we hire good people. I think that's critical, but those good people need to rely on systems. If they just rely on how good they are, when they have a bad day or a bad month, or like I said, heaven forbid, some life event, it's going to impact your investment. You don't want that to happen.
The systems are hugely important. I mean, we touched on a little bit before the show started, like the 6%, right? The cost of, you get what you pay for. And if you're trying to undercut A property management company, one of the things you're undercutting is their capacity to invest in their systems, their capacity to invest in your building. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So as I mentioned earlier, and you just said, there are a lot of management companies that undercut management fees, and sure, you could probably pay 25% less than you pay me for management. But you do get what you pay for. I'm hopeful that my margin in my business is between 10 and 15%. And if I give you a 20% reduction, I'm going to lose money on you. And first of all, I wouldn't do it because it wouldn't be worth it to me. But second of all, if you're confident that you have a good management company running your building, that management company needs to always be learning, always be improving, always be creating systems. And there need to be resources for that. So, frankly, a lot of it's not terribly hard to sell my higher management fee because most people are coming from paying a little bit less, but they've gotten what they've paid for, and that's why they're moving. The communication's not there. The unit's vacant for 6 months. The rent increase hasn't happened for 2 years, and they fell asleep on it. And so those are the sort of things that the additional management fee helps me keep everything in order. And here's another thing. I have an extreme sense of responsibility to my clients, and I hate it. The only thing that keeps me up at night is when a client is upset. And so if I didn't have the resources to do everything I needed to do to make a client happy, then I shouldn't be in this business because I want to sleep well at night, and I don't want to. I don't want a life after work full of stress and thinking about work.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand. So let me tell a little bit of a story, and then let's talk about pictures. So I did one time, I had this building that was being a particular problem. And so I started working deeply with my property management company, right? Because the building was being a problem and I really wanted to turn the building around. And so in working deeply with them, I started to appreciate and to be able to almost log the amount of hours that they were putting in my building. And I calculated at the 6% I was paying them, I was paying them 6%. At the 6% I was paying them, I said, I think I'm paying them like somewhere between $12 and $15 an hour for the amount of time they're actually putting into this. And I'm like, how does the property management company make money if they're probably paying their employee, the one that's assigned to my building, $12 to $15 an hour to begin with? I'm like, this doesn't make sense, right? Like I'm like, so therefore in getting deeper in the building and getting deeper with the problems and getting deeper with the property management company, I didn't get more disappointed. I got more satisfied in understanding the amount of work that my property manager was putting into my building to make it work, and was more grateful for the amount of time that they were applying and the amount of expertise they were applying. So.
Well, that makes me think about something. We in the first year of management, we rarely make money, and that's because we, generally we're brought buildings that have issues that need to be stabilized. That's why people are coming to us, because they were unhappy with their previous manager, or because they just purchased a building and it's troubled. And so I believe that, we don't charge a lot extra in the first year because of that. We believe that we're going to create a loyal customer who's going to stick with us for 4 or 5 years. And I have a huge incentive to make that building operate really well and to make all the right choices in the first year, because then I could be more successful in the second, third, fourth, and fifth year. And so can my client.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect description. My question had to do with pictures and regulations, because I find pictures are important in managing the building, especially for me as an owner, maybe a distant owner in particular. I need pictures to truly appreciate and understand what's going on. But I also need pictures in California to really be able to stand up to tenants' rights if I ever get questioned. So why don't we use that as a segue into what is current code? What are some of the limitations that you've been dealing with, and why a property management company is so important? Because they actually read those codes.
Absolutely. And in the last year, things have never changed quicker, never been more complicated. You talked about being an avid golfer, and for the last year, I haven't had a lot of time to golf because things have changed so quickly. COVID has impacted our industry greatly. although probably not as much as you'd expect. I mean, collections have still been very strong because there's been so much government assistance. But certainly, photos are incredibly important to reducing liability. And so we've got a really great software. We use Appfolio. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but we can
I
take
happen to be,
photos
yes.
and inspections, and we could post that to those to our client portals. And our clients can see what's going on. Our vendors can take photos of a completed job, so that reduces liability in terms of, if we're ever, which happens quite often, if we're evicting somebody, the number one defense is habitability. They're going to say, well, my place isn't
Yes.
working. I asked for this repair. They never did it. I don't have heat. My windows don't lock, et cetera, et cetera. And as long as we're keeping really good records, which is something that our people that self-manage don't always do, it really helps us. In fact, when we get to court and present our data in the hallway, generally we're able to stipulate before we even see a judge. So anyhow, that's sort of the photo side. And you said how have regulations changed? Do you want to go particularly into SB 91 in California?
Let's do it.
And how? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
let's educate them. Go for it.
Yeah, so in the our collections during COVID have been anywhere between 95 and 98%, which is still really strong. When we had pandemic unemployment assistance from the feds early on, that was an extra $600. I believe it was a week. Yeah, a week that not unemployed or even partially employed residents would make. And so collections were still strong, and there are unfortunately still a sliver of those residents that either really truly had some sort of hardship or are taking advantage of the system. And so early on, we did a lot of cash for keys deals. We were suggesting that people might go and we'll return their deposit to them, and we'll wipe out any unpaid rent. I believe it was late December, we got SB 91. It might have been a little later than that. But anyhow, SB 91 makes it such that we can apply for assistance, federal assistance through the state, where they pay 80% of the unpaid rent, as long as some important boxes are checked, and the owner has to forgive the remaining 20%, which is a great deal, in my opinion. And so we've been doing a lot less cash for keys and a lot more filing applications on behalf of the resident and our client to get 80% of the unpaid rent. So certainly things have been changing very quickly. Early on, it was crazy. Now they're changing a little more slowly. And I feel like things are getting back to normal. Of course, I think everybody does with respect to COVID, feel like things are getting back to normal. And we're hopeful that the moratorium is not going to be extended, but really just a few bad apples out there in terms of our residents. And the most important tip that I can give investors out there is you don't have a lot of rights. There isn't a lot that you can do. The government's helping. So do your best to create a relationship with your tenant, to work with them, to help them, to show them, what opportunities are out there for them to get assistance, so that they can pay you. We definitely never want the relationship to be combative with residents, because we need their help, and they're a lot more likely to pay their rent and to help and to try to do the right thing if you've got a good relationship with them.
There are other things that you've talked about that actually keeps the relationship with your tenant intact, but also helps ensure the success of the owner. One of the things is you guys like Autodraft rents, so rents get paid. The other thing is you're filling out that form for them, helping them understand current code, and filling out that form for them so that 80% of the rent still gets paid and the 20% is given by the landlord, which keeps the occupancy, the financial occupancy, up in a time when truly we were concerned about the potential wipeout that COVID would create. And again, these are things that you're doing to actually help the tenant that protect the landlord's interests.
Certainly, I agree with you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, early on, Christina, we thought I was projecting, 80% collections in the end of March, I thought, April is going to be maybe 90%, May is going to be 80%.
Right. Right.
And I was sharing that information with my clients. In fact, I started the Borba Report then, which was a newsletter that that was very helpful. My clients really enjoyed it. I give them all the new data and information each month in terms of what was changing with respect to COVID, and what things were looking like. And we're so thankful that it really wasn't so bad. And I still don't think that there's. I think it's only going to get better from here.
It seems like it would only get better, and we can get into all the reasons why multifamily ownership in particular seems to be sort of the golden child of real estate investing these days. They seem to, at least it seems that way to me, that a lot of the, forgive me, I'm trying to bring up the share screen. A lot of the projection of the finance people and the economists that I study with and follow, that they specifically keep talking about how, housing in Southern California is not getting more plentiful. Building is actually getting more difficult. Development's more difficult. I happen to know that personally, not that I'm a developer, but I'm a rehabber, and I see the amount of code and the amount of holding time that gets increased because of the permits and the hoops I need to jump through. And I've decided to no longer even do flips in Southern California or in California as a whole, because of the increased demands, money, time, and effort of trying to work with the California government in trying to create something new. It doesn't work very well. So we're not going to have this unprecedented level of development show up, at least not in Southern California, any probably decade soon. And so therefore the existing units and the existing units are only going to become more valuable and also be more sought after. So I see here on your website, you've got the Borba Report. People can sign up for it specifically here on your website. So let's move on, if we may. Let's move on to your hardest moment in real estate. It's always one of my favorite questions I like to ask in the second half of the show, because I think it puts the flesh and blood on what it really means to be a real estate investor. And you are a real estate investor as well as a real estate professional.
So I'd say probably, I can talk in terms of the business or my own real estate investments. I'm going to start with my own real estate investments because I think that's probably what your viewers are more interested in. And I believe probably the most difficult period was just a few years ago when I realized I was falling asleep at the wheel in terms of my investments. So my first investment was in 2004. I bought a triplex that I'm actually selling this month and exchanging into something else.
Okay.
And I've purchased over the years, either by myself or with partners, 15 different properties, and I've also contributed to some syndications. And I got so involved in the management business that I stopped looking at my own portfolio, and I realized that I had just way too much equity or not enough loan to value, and I needed to take advantage of more debt. So that basically shines a light on my sort of not paying attention to real estate and not always looking to learn new things and continuous improvement and continuous growth in real estate. I was doing it on the business side, but I wasn't doing it on the real estate side. So I think it's critical to evaluate your portfolio a few times a year to see how things are going. Like we talked about earlier, to make sure that you stay on top of your manager and have monthly reviews of financials to know what problems might be coming, or what problems they're experiencing. So I fell asleep at the wheel, and I think that's probably the toughest period I went through. Now I will talk about my dad's tough period.
Let's talk about it.
That shaped probably my conservatism in real estate investing.
Good.
I remember in the early 90s, my parents went through a really tough time. They started investing in the 70s, and in the 90s, my dad had plan A, B, and C. We thought of filing for bankruptcy. We have a property in the Central Valley that was doing okay, so we thought of moving to that property. And I'm 13, 14 years old, so I'm just along for the ride. But I certainly saw the impact that it had on my family, maybe the arguments that it created between my parents, and it shaped how we grew up and how frugal I've become, as an adult, because I saw my folks really struggle. And because there was a moment where my folks almost lost it all, I've been a lot more conservative. And now when I invest, or when I'm looking at my portfolio, I'm making sure that I'm prepared for the downside. We're probably not going to see a huge downside, not for another 8 or 10 years. I follow, oh boy, I can't think of the economic reports, but it's part of, I'm involved with Vistage, and I get some economic reports there that say that our next big downturn is probably going to be around 2030. And so I want to be ready for that. And if it were to happen tomorrow, I want to be in a position where I can handle the negative cash flow, and or still be breaking even, because after all, if you start early, you're going to you've got to do your best to continue investing. The rule of 72 is something I always use: doubling time, divide your your rate of return into 72, see what your doubling time is. You don't need to take huge risks to create a great portfolio in the long run. So make sure you manage risk well.
I appreciate that story, and the reason being that, I'm a hard money lender as well, like we talked about. And one of the questions I actually ask people before I lend them any money is, tell me your worst moment in real estate. What'd you do? How'd you solve it? And how'd you grow up from it? Because I have definitely found that if you've never seen hardship in real estate, those rosy glasses are there, and you may not even be aware of it. It's not that I am against newbies. It's not that I'm against, being able to see the brighter side of life. Actually, I'm a great believer in seeing the brighter side of life, but I'm also a great believer in being able to be grounded in that there is a reality that we choose to live in. And that reality can go sideways. It doesn't have to, but it can. And you want to be able to be settled in, who am I going to be when it goes sideways? Not that you are prepared to stop it from going sideways. Like, yeah, conservatism helps you from having it go sideways, but who are you when it goes sideways? Because it's going to probably go sideways on you, even if you're conservative. What character is going to show up? How are you going to solve the problem? Are you going to curl up in a corner like I did for 6 months in the downturn and then come forward and go, okay, who am I going to be? Right? Are you going to face that moment, and are you going to move forward, and are you going to take care of your investor base or not?
Yep.
I can't define that for people, but that is what's going to make my money safe when I hand my money over to somebody else.
Yep.
Is what they choose to do.
Yep.
So I got to know how they do that.
Yeah, excellent.
Right? So I love hearing the stories, because I think that's a powerful thing for me to understand about people. So financial freedom. What does financial freedom mean to you? You have a business. It's obviously successful, right? You're growing it in a very calculated and intentional way. You could just rely on the income of the business, but of course the business is in real estate, but you are developing your own personal portfolio along the way in order to invest in your financial freedom. So tell me about that.
I think it's interesting. That's one of the things that I recognized a few years ago, is that I was putting so much effort into the management business, but what was really going to create wealth for me in the long term was my real estate investments. When I realized how much this company might be worth one day, and frankly, the intention is not to sell anyways.
Okay.
For me, success, and I think this was the question. Success is being able to take time away from the business when I want to, being able to spend time with my family, and not having the stress of business follow me all the way around my life, right? Follow me on the weekends, follow me in the evenings. I want to be able to give as much focus time as I can to my family.
So real estate's going to help you break through to that vision in your head.
Certainly. Well, because as you continue to develop wealth, and you said you were talking about flipping, and we've done a little bit of that. But my overall goal is to continue to grow my investments. I'll never need to sell one. Hopefully, 1031 exchanges are around for a long time. But I want to build wealth such that, and if it does go away, I think it'll come back. But anyhow,
Okay. Well, they've limited to 500 currently, so
well, potentially, right?
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially.
So.
You're right.
So anyways, I want to grow my my net worth in real estate holdings, so that whatever equity I have there is paying me at 5, 6, or 7% cash flow, and I'll be able to have that freedom. I've been fortunate in that I started investing really early, and I've already achieved much of that freedom. I don't worry as much now about paying the bills, and keeping my family fed. But certainly now that's why I'm focusing a little more on the downside, and making sure that we stay that way. Success is having freedom, and being able to get out when you want to, and not being concerned about the finances.
Now I'm gonna tickle you a little bit, if I may. You mentioned
Sure.
earlier about traveling with your kids, so
Yeah. So I would like to. I'm still very involved in the day-to-day of the management business. I'm working now on developing a leadership team. I'm basically the CFO, COO, CEO, and I want to develop the leadership team. We've got 50 employees now, and if I develop a team at the top that can do what I'm doing for my clients and give me a little bit of freedom. In about 5 years, my wife and I plan to take our kids around the world, maybe spend 3 or 6 months 1 year and 3 or 6 months the next year traveling the country. And I think that those are probably going to be the best years of my kids' lives. Those are going to be the best experiences. It's going to shape them. They're going to see how people live in the rest of the world. They're going to gain a ton of knowledge from meeting people all over the world, and I think it's going to shape their future. And so that's one of my goals, and that's what I want some of that freedom for, certainly.
all right. So leaving a legacy sounds
Yep,
like part of it. Being able to shape their future, being able to shape them as good human beings. I'm going to put good in
absolutely.
there. I assume that's your intention, whatever good means to you. And being able to find the freedom to be able to do that for yourself. Because it doesn't sound like you're avoiding your business. It sounds like you're investing in your children.
That's correct. That's the plan.
All right. Thank you so very much for your time. So appreciate it. This is Christina Suter with the Real Estate Breakthrough Show. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and iTunes, as well as YouTube and Roku TV.